Hey everybody, this is Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff, and a little miss just popped onto my lap. I'm going to have to kick her out because she might get into things and knock over my camera. So the flagship devices keep pouring out. We just saw the release of the Galaxy Note 5, over $800. It's crazy. It gets crazy. A lot of people are not going to want to pay full retail price, so they have to either get themselves onto a contract to knock down and have a subsidized price, or they can pay monthly installments for this really expensive phone, such as the Galaxy Note 5 or one of the other flagships. We are seeing other flagships that try to push down that price, but still, that's along the lines of a price that some people just don't want to pay for, and I can understand that. So I've been kind of on the lookout for really great mid-range to entry-level devices, ones that you can just drop $200 or even less than $200 and have a great working phone. So I just received a device that's at a really great price point. This is the Alcatel One Touch Idol 3. This is the 4.7 inch. I already took a look at the 5.5 inch. You can take a look in the description to get the link to the video for the 5.5 inch review. Now the One Touch Idol 3 4.7 inch goes directly against the Moto G 2015. So I want to take a little bit of a look at it right now, see what it offers in comparison to the Moto G. So let's take a look. So let's start off with talking about the bare bone differences of these devices. So the price of the Moto G is $219. This is the 16 gigabyte version, 2 gigabytes of RAM. You can also go cheaper for 8 gigabytes internal storage and 1 gigabyte of RAM, although I sincerely recommend going with this one here. Then for the Idol 3, this is $179.99 or $180. So we do have a nice bit of difference between these two, but still both of them are within that $200 range. Then we've got some obvious differences on the outside, such as the size of these. What you get with the Idol 3 is a very slim profile, very, very light phone. I can barely feel this in my pocket, and that says a lot, especially when having to wear lady jeans, where our pockets are very, very shallow. So I really appreciate this. The size is just wonderful. I've got small hands, so this phone feels very, very nice in the hand. This is probably a nice lady-sized phone, or if you're just somebody who wants a phone that's inconspicuous, I highly recommend this. The flip side is the Moto G, which is just a lot heavier, very, very hefty. It surprises you when you pick it up, when you discover how hefty it is. I would say that the build quality is better on this device. It feels more substantial, more stable. It is also water resistant, so you can dunk it in water down to 1 meter for a half hour. So you can take off this back cover. No access to the battery on either of these devices. The batteries are locked in. But you can see that we've got this rubber here which keeps this watertight. Also, we have a bigger battery inside of the Moto G. This is 2,470 milliamp hours versus the 2,000 milliamp hours that we have inside of the Idol. Now I feel that Motorola skimped more than Alcatel did. When you go underneath the settings, we can see that the Idol 3 has NFC, which is really nice if you're interested in Android Pay or paying with Google Wallet. Motorola decided to cut some corners, and there is no NFC on the Moto G, so one that feels a little bit more future-proof would be the Idol 3. I really have to give major points for having NFC on the device, especially at this price point. Another thing that the Idol 3 has going for it is that it has a gyroscope sensor inside of it where the Moto G does not. So if you are interested at all in the new 360 videos that you can find on YouTube, you can use the gyroscope to watch those videos where you can't do that with the Moto G. So again, this feels more future-proof. Now as far as the displays go, we have a 4.7 inch display on the Idol 3 and a 5 inch display on the Moto G. So if you want a little bit bigger of a display, a little bit more real estate, I would go for the Moto G. But because this is a smaller display, both of these are 720p, you end up with a little bit higher pixel density on the Idol 3, although it's very hard to even tell the difference. What you do get with the Idol 3 though is a brighter display. I've been able to measure it with my colorimeter as being brighter than the Moto G and also has a better contrast ratio. Otherwise, their calibrations seem to be very, very similar, except for I see a little bit more saturation in the blues on the Idol 3. Both of these displays have a very cool tone to them, and so the colors end up looking a little bit on the bluish side as well. So you can expect bluish looking whites and a bit of a bluish cast to the colors on both of these. Another thing that the Idol 3 offers over the Moto G is that it has stereo speakers in the front. They're pretty decent, at least for a phone at this price point, they're pretty decent. So wrapping up what we have just on the surface here, you've got better build quality, you've got waterproof, bigger display, bigger battery, versus on the Idol 3 you have it being a lot thinner, a lot lighter. You've got NFC, you've also got a gyroscope, you've got stereo speakers. So let's carry on to talking about the internal specifications. So both of these devices have the Snapdragon 410 SoC inside of them. There's a little bit of difference in terms of the CPU frequencies. So with the Moto G, we have 1.4 gigahertz. This is a quad-core CPU, so you've got 4 Cortex A53 cores clocked at 1.4 gigahertz versus 4 Cortex A53 cores clocked at 1.2 gigahertz. Now, when I did my benchmarks, there really isn't such a huge difference. I saw about a 6 to a 10% difference. Going about the UI, I don't notice too much of a difference. The Moto G feels just a little bit more smooth, but they're both very, very responsive, especially for how cheap they are. So I really don't let that 0.2 gigahertz jump in the Moto G be a deciding factor over the two. They both have the Adreno 306 GPU inside of them. Now, even though the CPU cores are a little bit faster on the Moto G, you can see that there is no such difference with the GPU. It's just the same thing. So with this version, we have the 16 gigabytes internal storage and there's 2 gigabytes of RAM, whereas on the Idol 3, we have also 16 gigabytes of internal storage, but there's just 1.5 gigabytes of RAM. And I have found that to be interesting because when I am doing multitasking on both of these devices, they both run head-to-head just fine, although I did find it interesting that the Idol 3 ended up keeping some apps open longer, whereas on the Moto G, some of the games and things I had loaded refreshed quicker than they did on the Idol 3. Actually, they never did refresh on the Idol 3, than they did refresh on the Moto G. So that 1.5 gigabytes of RAM really hasn't hurt it at all from what I have seen specifically. It's really nice that the RAM management is not aggressive on either one of these devices. I can get several apps running without them shutting down. Sometimes with lower end phones, and especially with the Moto G before, one of the previous versions of the Moto G, I saw just how aggressive it was at shutting down applications, and I'm not seeing that at all anymore. What's really nice about both of these devices is that they are both running pretty close to stock Lollipop. You've just got a couple of things that Motorola has added, but the overall experience has not been interrupted whatsoever, and I feel the same way with the Idol 3, although we do have its own little animations. We've also got that reversible UI feature and double tap screen to turn the display on and off. The thing to pay attention to, though, is that with the Moto G, it looks like you're going to be getting more or at least quicker updates. We have Android version 5.1.1, Lollipop versus 5.0.2 that we're still stuck on with the Idol 3. So you can decide how you feel about that. Of course, a huge difference between the Idol 3 and the Moto G is that you can customize the way that your Moto G looks. You can choose your back cover underneath Moto Maker, as well as the accent here. And also you have the ability to choose black or white. So with the white, you have a lighter colored silver plastic, whereas on the black one, you've got a bit of a darker color. So it's nice to have some personalizability, whereas this is the only color that the Idol 3 comes in. Now let's talk about the camera qualities a little bit. Both of these have 13 megapixel cameras on them. So the first thing that I want to say about using these cameras is that I feel that the Moto G has the overall edge. I think that it does better with taking photos than the Idol 3 does. So if I had to choose between them and the major deciding factor was the camera, I would definitely go with the Moto G. I notice that a lot of the time the Idol 3 will either really overexpose or underexpose photos. A lot of them seem too contrasty, too dark for my taste. So when looking at the HDR photos that both of these take, I see that the Moto G has consistently better results. Neither of these are perfect, but I think that the results from the Idol 3 are quite unpredictable. A lot of them are just way too wonky. Now in terms of taking photos in low light, neither of these are good at taking low light photos, but they both do have a flash, and what's nice specifically about the Moto G is that it's got a dual tone flash, so the white balance when you're taking pictures with the flash looks a lot better, where it's a bit more bluish on what we have with the Idol 3. Now if you're going to just be taking photos in low light, just right off camera, I think that the Idol 3 surprisingly does better. We don't see as much grain, and it doesn't have as much trouble focusing. in low lighting like the Moto G does. The Moto G has a real problem trying to get a focus in low lighting. You can turn on some of the manual settings and try to adjust the exposure manually. But once you do that, the ISO goes really high and you just have the craziest, grainiest looking photo. So if you're going to not be using the flash, I would go with the Idol 3. It does a little bit better in low lighting situations, but neither of them are good. So these are just okay cameras. Don't expect anything phenomenal. But if I had to be stuck using one of them in my general daily use, I would definitely go with the Moto G. So thank you everybody for watching. This has been Erica, the technology nerd, likes to film stuff. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Both of these are very great phones. I feel that the Idol 3 offers just a little bit more for the price point, just in comparison. It's really nice that this phone has NFC. Maybe that doesn't matter to a lot of people, but we're seeing a lot more of NFC-based payments. So I think that that's really cool that this includes that. But if you really must have a larger display, larger battery, and have waterproofing, I don't think you can go wrong with the Moto G. Plus you can customize it. So again, both are great phones. It just depends on what you want. Let me know which one of these that you prefer specifically. I think that just for myself, I would probably just buy the Idol 3 if I wanted to have a really good price point and a thin phone. I feel that the Moto G is a bit bulky for me, and the waterproofing is not necessary. So let me know what you think of these phones in the comment section below, and have a good night.